So today we're going to talk about asylum seekers. What is asylum? What are their rights? And what is humanity's responsibility towards injustices faced by them? Where there is persecution of individuals anywhere in the world, if they have the means, they move to another country and either stay there illegally or seek asylum. There are international conventions to protect the rights of asylum seekers, and our speaker, who practices in this area of law, will speak on that. Then there are refugees in millions. We see them on our screens, see the hardships faced by them, their inhumane treatment by the so-called civilized nations, and our speaker will touch on that too. Sheikh Dr. Imranali Panjwani studied law at the University of Sheffield, the University of Law, and Western Sydney University. He completed his PhD at King's College London in England. He is currently a senior lecturer in law at Anglia Ruskin University. He is also the head of diverse legal consulting in England, where he writes expert reports for asylum seekers. As well, he has extensive training in Islamic studies, which he pursued in England and in Iran. He regularly lectures at Islamic institutions and has weekly tafsir or interpretation sessions online. Dr. Panjwani, welcome to Baraza, Toronto. We look forward to your presentation.
Jazakallah. Thank you very much, Nazmul Bhai. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the merciful and compassionate, praise belongs to him, and may Allah bless Muhammad and his family. Assalamun alaikum, or peace be upon all of you. Everyone, I know that we have an international audience, all sort of religions, cultures. So I will make it as broad as possible. First, I just want to say thank you to Nazmul Bhai for giving me this opportunity. It's an honor to address all of you, and may Allah bless the work of the Baraza meetings, and inshallah, may we all help each other in the way of God. So without further ado, as you are all aware, the title of this session is "What is our responsibility towards asylum seekers fleeing persecution?" and is deliberately chosen to jolt us into thinking beyond ourselves, into thinking how other people live and the suffering they undergo simply because a government, a family, a tribe, or a gang may persecute them, that is the asylum seeker, their family, their wives, their children, and they have no other choice except to leave their country and to seek a refuge and to seek solace in another country. It's perhaps something that perhaps all of us, as people in relatively comfortable surroundings, with access to a laptop and Zoom, with access to the comfort of our own home, that we may very easily take for granted. It's something that inspires me daily because I chose law not to make money, but to help people. That's the, I'm speaking from my heart. And the reason that I pursued Islamic studies and other connected studies is so I could see what kind of world we should live in and what are the problems that humanity faces. Now that's just the basic context and inspiration for you, but let's be very specific here. I've done a PowerPoint and I don't want to make it boring. I want to try to make it interactive as well. Let me just first of all share with you the PowerPoint so that you actually see some statistics and some examples of what people are going through. So let us appreciate Who is an asylum seeker? How many asylum seekers are there? What's the difference between an asylum seeker and a refugee? And let's take a few case studies. So let me just share my screen. Right, so hopefully you can see the screen. I'm going to put a slideshow. Let's see if this works. Right, so hopefully you can see this. Just if you can't see it or there's a problem, Nazmul Bhai or any person, please tell me, okay? Now you can see the picture I've put, okay? It's not an exaggeration. You can see the child, crying or wanting some refuge. You see people on the boat. Now, this picture that you see happens daily, except it could happen on the sea, it could happen in lorries, it could happen across borders. So this small picture that I've put there for you is just for us to appreciate that every day people are trying to salvage and save their lives. And let's give some reality to this. Okay, I will go back to some definitions, but as of 2021, over 84 million forcibly displaced people worldwide. 26.6 million, right, are refugees worldwide, and 4.4 million are asylum seekers in the world, right? Now, why have I put these statistics? Because we have a notable section of the population that do not have a place to live and do not have basic amenities. We're talking about shelter and food. And let me tell you the difference between an asylum seeker and refugee, because a lot of people often get this confused. Asylum seekers, as you can see from the screen, are people who flee their own country and seek sanctuary in another country. They apply for asylum. Now, what is asylum? That is the right to be recognized as a refugee and receive legal protection and material assistance. An asylum seeker must demonstrate that his or her fear of persecution in his or her home country is well founded. Now, look at the two aspects of this. You have an asylum seeker, somebody fleeing persecution, but doesn't have the right to receive legal protection and material assistance in his own country. So he's actually fighting for the right to be recognized as a human being. Put it very simply. A human being should have the right to have some protection and assistance, but an asylum seeker is seeking that right. Do you see that? Right? And number two, that right doesn't come automatically. It's not like you come to a country and you receive these rights. You must demonstrate that you have a well-founded fear of persecution in your home country. Look at how the law is constructed, right? When we say humanity, as is there in the title, or our human responsibility, like as if we are one human family, well, it's nice to say that, but in reality, that is not the case. There are some human beings that in their own country, or once they leave their own country, they don't have protection and they have to prove their humanity. They have to prove their humanity, that it's well-founded, that we are fearing persecution, in order to be granted that very protection. Just keep this definition in your mind. This is different to a refugee, right? A refugee, right, as you see here, is someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. Just take the first bit, you don't have to read the rest, okay? So an asylum seeker...
Panjwani,
yes.
Can you move the slides, please? I think you're stuck on slide 1.
Yeah, I went back. This was asylum seekers, and now we are back to definitions. Can you see the definition slide there?
No, on the screen we see the first. On the screen we see the first slide.
Okay, one second. Don't worry. Okay, what about now? Can you see?
No, it hasn't moved. Yeah, now that's it.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay, what about now? Can you see this?
Yes.
Yes?
Distinction between asylum seeker. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'll do it like this. No problem. That's fine. Okay. So as I was reading out, okay, that an asylum seeker that then finds a country, right, and comes to that country by illegal means. And when we say illegal, that term is actually very biased because the asylum seeker doesn't have a choice of how to leave the country. They usually pay agents, right? They pay for visas and passports, sometimes fake, but they pay for this to be done. And then they are transported in lorries, right? Or boats, as you saw from the picture, and they cross various countries before, for example, reaching United Kingdom or Canada. I'll mainly speak about UK, but I'll give 1 or 2 examples of Canada as well, right? So I want to just give you an example here. In this definition that you see, right, you see, and I'll highlight it for you, race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. The asylum seeker must say that, look, I'm fearing persecution because of my race, right? Or religion, right? Take, for example, the recent crisis in Iraq, for example, that because of ISIL, you have particular groups, let's say of Shia or Sunni Muslims or Christians or Yazidis who are persecuted on the basis of their race or religion, or on the basis of their nationality, right? For example, let's say some Chinese people may be persecuted in Malaysia. Some cases that I have dealt with. Membership of a particular social group. Now, this could be sexual identity, it could be gender, right? It could be tribal identity. So any of these, if you're persecuted simply because you are a woman, right? That can count. Or political opinion, a very common one. This is one case that I'm dealing with, is if you are a member of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt or the Freedom of Justice Party. These are obviously major parties set up a number of years ago. The Egyptian government persecutes any political group or any political opinion and those supporting that political opinion if it threatens the status quo and the government. So I've given you this detail to show you that just because an asylum seeker leaves their country of origin and reaches the borders of a different country doesn't necessarily mean that, as sometimes you see in the news, or for example, Canada or the UK, we have accepted asylum seekers and refugees. See, that the media doesn't generally talk about what the asylum seeker has to prove, right? So imagine the arduous journey, physical journey of the asylum seeker, that's one. And then second, what they have to prove. Once they prove this, and if it is accepted by the Home Office of their country, then they become a refugee. And they become a refugee and they have the right to stay in the country until such time as they can go back. But usually once you're accepted as a refugee, you can then apply many, many years later to be, for example, to have a settlement status or a citizenship status, usually after, for example, 5 years, okay? So that's the definitions at the moment, and I hope that is clear. Nazmul Bhai, can I just ask, is my voice and everything clear in the way I'm doing the PowerPoint? It's all smooth?
Everything's good. So far, so good. Yeah.
All right.
Let's
Okay.
continue. Thank you.
So let's just go to some statistics. You saw this slide, right? The amount of refugees and asylum seekers. So now with that context, you can see that although there are less asylum seekers and refugees, that's natural. Why? Because not every person is willing to take that risk to travel different countries to then reach a stable country and get refugee status. That's why, 4.4 million is going to be less than 26.6 million. That is natural, right? And I'll give you a snapshot, okay? Somebody that leaves Iraq, right, because of ISIL, right? Where would they go? Maybe they would go to Iran, right? And if they cannot gain asylum there, they would go to Turkey, and then let's say they would go to Italy. If they can reach Italy, they would go to Greece, to France, and then UK. That would be roughly your general journey, obviously with the exception of some 1 or 2 countries being different, but that's a general course, right? From the Middle East to sort of Europe, right? And then to, I mean, again, there's a debate, Europe and more Western countries, but Europe and then let's say the UK or to Canada, right? If you look at these statistics here, ranking of the largest refugee hosting countries as of 2020, actually you'll see, I'll make it bigger, okay? You'll see Turkey, right, actually hosts the largest refugees, right? 3.6, 3.7 million almost. And then Uganda, Pakistan, Germany, Sudan, Bangladesh, Lebanon. If you look, obviously the countries that are closest to the Middle East, right, or closest to where the threat of persecution exists, Turkey, Uganda, Pakistan would naturally host the most number of refugees, because asylum seekers would stop at the nearest country. You see that, right? But just because you become a refugee in that country doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be looked after. Because we know that Turkey, Uganda, and Pakistan are not necessarily as stable or have as many amenities and securities in terms of health, in terms of well-being, than, for example, Germany or the UK, right, or Canada. We know that in these countries there's greater health security and economic security, right? We know that Pakistan itself has its own issues. We know that Uganda and Turkey has its own issues, political issues, whereas Germany and the UK or Canada, let's say, are relatively stable. So now you might ask yourself a very important question here. Why aren't other Western countries like Canada or the UK doing as much? And this becomes a very political question, because here it links into the fact that if these countries are supplying arms or have political pacts with groups and with countries that are causing destruction in the Middle East, and then they leave those asylum seekers to remain there and don't accept as much, then it means they're not fulfilling their humanitarian responsibility to those countries in which they are the cause of certain wars and certain divisions. And I'll just give you a few statistics before I go on to some more problem questions, which I think you may find interesting, right? In 2019, Canada did become, I mean, they say a world leader in the resettlement of refugees, provided 30,082 refugees with the opportunity to build a new life, all right? They're actually trying to meet a target of sort of almost 100 to 150,000, but they haven't reached there yet, all right? The UK had 132,349 refugees, right? But again, you still have pending asylum cases and stateless persons, right? So you see that countries do try and host refugees, but the number is significantly less than this graph here that you see here. So us, people on Zoom, maybe logging in from the UK, from Canada, from other places in the world, where there is perhaps some stability, you can see that our own countries, despite the peace and the security, perhaps isn't doing enough. Now, I want to actually comment on just some basic procedure for you, right? When an asylum seeker arrives, now this is just based on the UK, when an asylum seeker arrives, they're assigned to a local council and social services. they're represented by a solicitor. The solicitor takes down the witness statement, they go for a Home Office interview, right? And here, crucially, the Home Office determines the asylum claim. So there's no court or anything. The solicitor just goes and submits the witness statement and some reports to the Home Office, and the Home Office says, okay, your threat of persecution is legitimate or not. If they are accepted, all well and good. But in 50 to 60% of cases, they are rejected. So it's a lottery. If rejected, they have the right of appeal. And here the solicitor may call upon a country expert to support the asylum claim. This is my work. So they call me and they say, okay, Imranali, we have this asylum seeker. Can you write a report on what is happening, for example, in Iraq, right? Or in Malaysia, right? Can you write a report on some of the issues that are happening there, which can support the case? Why would they select me, or why would they select other country experts? Because of our expertise. And I'm giving the example here of Islam and Muslims, because majority of asylum seekers are Muslim, but of course, you do have non-Muslim asylum seekers as well, fearing all sorts of persecution. For example, people who escape witchcraft in Nigeria, right? People who are members of political parties in Malaysia or other parts of Africa, and they are fleeing persecution, right? So you see that the solicitor may call upon myself or other people to bolster the case, right? And then you go through various processes where you have acceptance or rejection by the tribunal, and eventually you try your best to gain a right for the asylum seeker. And if the upper tribunal rejects you, then there are very few options that the asylum seeker has. So again, I'm painting this picture to you so you can see that the asylum seeker that comes to a country has to go through these processes. Now, if you look at this procedure, what can we say here? Let's give a very balanced comment, right? Whether you are from the UK, whether you're from Canada, whether you're from other countries. Immigration law is transparent, right? That means, look, we have to praise and respect the laws of the UK or Canada or other countries. The fact that these laws are there, the fact that there is a process, we have to commend that. That's why I put a plus point here, okay? And there is an attempt to have a level of objectivity that, okay, even if the government rejects you, you can appeal against the government. I pose you a question. Can you do that in Muslim countries? Can you do that in other countries? Generally, you cannot. Take Saudi Arabia, you may take Iraq, you may take many other countries where there isn't a transparent asylum procedure. And therefore, when you go to those countries, you're put in detention centers. Saudi Arabia is one very pertinent example, right? I'm not talking about Novak Djokovic and Australia, as interesting as it is. And in fact, that's a very good example. Look how much is made of Novak Djokovic staying in, okay, a so-called immigration detention center or hotel, can't play tennis, etc., when people are suffering around the world. So that is a snapshot for all of you as to what is reported in the media and the real cases that aren't, right? But we have to commend and respect the level of procedure that is there. And even with Novak Djokovic, you actually see that Australian government didn't necessarily, were not necessarily smooth, were not necessarily consistent in their immigration procedure or COVID procedure. Now you can see how much asylum seekers have to go through. But there is a problem, and that is a negative here. Home Office often makes mistakes, right? Are under pressure to go through a lot of asylum claims, fail to understand the country and the context of the asylum claim. How can a United Kingdom government or a Canadian government or an Australian government specifically understand, right? That when, and I'm giving you examples that I've dealt with, when a woman gets divorced, let's say in Pakistan, and there is stigma against the women, and the family wants to commit an honor killing, right? Or wants to try to ostracize that woman, then where does the woman go, right? Can a UK government understand the culture of divorce in such a country? If, for example, Malaysia, right, is strict or sectarian, let's say, against Shia Muslims or against other denominations or against people that don't have a religion, where does that person go? And how do you understand that religious sensitivity and the interpretation of texts, which is what I deal with a great deal? How do you actually sorry, I'm going to stop the sharing for 1 minute. How do you actually understand that level of interpretation and that cultural nuance when you require the expertise to help the asylum seeker? So that's why I'm saying that in the negative section, I put there that whilst the system is there, asylum claims are rejected. Why? Because the government or the Home Office doesn't necessarily understand the deeper sensitivities, whether it could be Hinduism, whether it's Islam, whether it's other religions that we are dealing with. Now, obviously, my expertise is within the realm of Islam, but I'm trying to make it as broad as possible that this is the general challenges that asylum seekers face. The other negative is, as you can see on the screen, that country guidance may be biased and country expert reports vary in quality and can adversely affect a hearing. So even what is produced by governments, by, for example, the United Kingdom government, isn't necessarily objective. I'll give you one example, right? In fact, you can go on Google now, and if you were to put country guidance reports provide information to the government of how to make decisions, like what is happening in Pakistan or Saudi Arabia or India or whatever is happening in those countries. If you go on the main government website and you see that there are country reports, data on countries, interesting, you'll find that there's no country guidance on Saudi Arabia, right? Whereas we do know factually that Saudi Arabia does discriminate against other types of Muslims and people that work in Saudi Arabia, whether they're coming from Pakistan or India and Malaysia. A lot of people come there to work, but they are not treated as equal citizens to the naturalized citizens in Saudi Arabia. But there is no report about that. And you can guess why. Because it will affect the political relationship and the military relationship between Saudi Arabia and Western countries. So you see that even though we're talking about law, we're also talking about political relationships. A few more slides. If you don't mind, I would like to give you a case study just within the Islamic context. I'm aware that the audience may be diverse, but I want to share this with you because this is part of my research. So I'm going to give you a case study just to do in the Islamic context. And then the solution that I'm humbly going to give is actually beyond the Islamic context. It is inspired from the Quran, but it's something that could be applicable and help all asylum seekers, regardless of their religion, the culture, and denomination, right? Now, if you look at the Quranic view of migration, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or God, says, he who emigrates in the path of God will find frequent refuge and abundance. Okay, Surah An-Nisa, that is chapter number 4, verses 97 to 99. So the notion, I mean, as Muslims say, hijrah, migration, the notion of migration to find a refuge is there in the Quran. That notion is there. And I'll give you obviously some examples. And so we do have this sense that people can flee their country or where they are living for refuge and abundance or for risk. Here is a specific example, right? Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Innal ladina tawaffahumul malaikatu ظالمي أنفسهم قالوا فيما كنتم قالوا كنا مستضعفين في الأرض. Indeed, those whom the angels take away while they are wronging themselves, they ask, what state were you in? They reply, we were abased in the land. We were suffering some kind of affliction, whether that was caused by themselves or by others. And they say, well, was not Allah's earth vast enough so that you might migrate in it? The refuge of such shall be hell, and it is an evil destination. Now, there is a context to this verse, which actually is people who are wronging themselves, who are suffering their desires and committing injustices to themselves, immorality. So God says, oh, why couldn't you protect your morality? Why couldn't you protect yourselves by going to another place? Right? So there is an aspect of interpretation here, but the point of fleeing to protect your morality, right, is there in the Quran, right? That is one verse. Another is another very clear verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا فِي اللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا ظُلِمُوا لِنَبُوِّئَهُمْ فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَالْأَجْرُ الْآخِرَةِ أَكْبَرُ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. Those who migrate for the sake of Allah, after they have been wronged, we will surely settle them in a good place in the world, and the reward of the hereafter surely greater had they known. So again, migrating for the sake of Allah after they have been wronged, Allah says we will surely settle them in a good place in the world. Now, I'm careful to use the terminologies of asylum seeker and refugee and immigration, because sometimes Muslims, or sometimes any religious person, we sometimes have a habit of saying everything is there in the Quran or everything is there in our religious text. All we have to do is go back to the text and we'll find a solution. And it doesn't work like that, because you see from these verses that they are reviewed in particular context. Sometimes it's about people who are immoral and they should flee to protect their morality. And sometimes it's about fleeing persecution, right? But nonetheless, the concept of migration and fleeing is there in the Quran to protect one's livelihood, and morality is there in the Quran. And historically, we see Prophet Ibrahim or Abraham and his family were forced to migrate and were supported by God in their endeavor. Or after being harassed by the Egyptians, Moses fled to Midian, where he was provided with housing, employment, and other amenities. And the same thing with Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who, as the Muslims in the audience would know, that he sent some of his companions to Abyssinia, where the king gave them protection. And then later on, he also sought refuge in the Shi'ab, or the valley of Abu Talib, when he had to flee Makkah, and he sought refuge between a valley between Makkah and Medina. So you see that these are examples in history, and those in the audience who are of different religions, you may cite your own examples, or those you may talk about African American history, for example, in America, which I remember studying at A level, beautiful sort of lessons I remember, and interesting history, and the suffering that they suffered. So the concept of migration, you can say, is both a religious concept and is both a general human concept. So my question to all of you is this, right? And I want to pose this question to all of you, is whatever religion we are from, wherever we are living in the world, what can we do to help asylum seekers? What can our communities do to help asylum seekers and refugees that come on our shores, where we can actually try to give them protection, to help them fight for their rights, to recognize them, right? I posed this question earlier on. These asylum seekers, women and children, many of them who are trafficked, they're trafficked for drugs, they're trafficked for prostitution, they're trafficked in ways that we cannot imagine. I mean, I don't want to speak for too long, but I have a witness statement here. I have a witness statement here, which I have blacked out. Maybe just I'll share one. I wanted to go through it, but I want to limit myself to 5 minutes because I want to provide a solution to you to answer this question. What can we do? I have a humble solution. Let me just share with you the witness statement that I have, just so you can see what they go through. Okay, I'm just going to read out a few sentences only, no more than that. Okay, you can see. Can you see this witness statement of applicant? All right, this is what I deal with weekly. I get this in my inbox weekly. All right, this is to do with somebody fleeing Egypt because they were persecuted because they were a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, or their father was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. And as you know, Muslim Brotherhood fights for basic political and religious and social rights in Egypt, right? I'm just going to read to you one paragraph only. All right, just look at what he's going through. Okay, this is what, if I'm correct, the Sun says. Paragraph 7. We heard a knock on the door, and my mother answered the door. We were faced with 4 armed Egyptian officers. They entered the house and arrested my father. We were not told why my father was arrested. They simply took him away. I never saw him again after this day. My father did resist arrest. My father asked why he was being arrested and took him by force. I do not know where he was taken and whether or not he is alive. Just digest that, right? We are, with our families, our dear father and mother, brother and sister. Of course, maybe some of our parents may have passed away, but maybe, I don't know all of you in the audience and what you have gone through. Okay, I know that my heritage, or that my mother's side of the family were refugees. They had to leave Uganda and then come to the UK. So of course that experience is there. But in the current context, when we talk about Muslim countries, based on what I read, I can tell you 100% that the majority of our Muslim countries are not Muslim countries. They do not practice Islamic values, because this is not an example of justice. How can you arrest somebody without telling them why? How can you arrest them without taking them, and giving them a fair trial? This is what the Muslim Brotherhood actually fights for. A lot of the Muslim Brotherhood members are arrested and persecuted without being given fair trial. Okay, so I'm sharing this with you just so you see the atrocities that they face. Okay, now going back to the humble solution and the question, what can we do? This is based on the last 3-4 years of research, which I am sharing with you, and then I'm going to end, okay? And then open it up. Now, you can see that on this slide, I've put the title, A Possible Solution, Minority Case Law. What is minority case law? Okay, you all are aware that, and I'm going to give a very simple example. If let's say you are driving and you go past a red traffic light. You go past a red traffic light, right? Now, you went past a red traffic light, maybe in an emergency situation. Maybe you had to help somebody. Maybe you saw somebody on the road, right? You saw somebody lying there and you wanted to go and help them. Maybe they had fallen to the ground, or an elderly person. You run the red traffic light because you want to stop the traffic and you're going to help the elderly person, right? Now, you, however, get a fine. Okay, you get a fine, you're about to lose your license or penalty points. You receive the letter in the post and you're shocked. And you obviously want to fight that, right? You say, no, I did it genuinely because I want to help this elderly person that had fallen down on the road. Now, what's the normal procedure? You would take this to the magistrate's court or to the first court, and you would present your case, or the barrister or lawyer would present your case, right? Now, just that snapshot I'm giving you is an example of a fair system. And if you were to keep fighting that, and it goes to the court and maybe to the Court of Appeal or Supreme Court, what would be produced? Your case would be recorded, and that would be known as case law, right? So if somebody else in the community or in the audience did the same thing, then the judge would say, oh, wait, we had a case before, right? And in that case, you successfully appealed because you had a legitimate reason of necessity, right? That is known as case law. You have cases. Now, what about the asylum seeker? What happens to them? The asylum seeker would present the case in an immigration tribunal. So their case, if they're fleeing ISIL, if they're fleeing Boko Haram in Nigeria, if they're fleeing some party in India, political party, whatever it is, that would be recorded. The problem is this. You might say, well, why do we have to do anything? Our government takes care of it. The court takes care of it. But there is a big problem, which is 50% of these cases are denied, or 50% of asylum seekers' claims are denied. Why? Because as I said before, the government or the Home Office doesn't necessarily understand the nuance or the religious and the cultural nuance of what the asylum seeker is going through. Take between Shia and Sunni, okay? You know, Shias and Sunni sometimes are, the groups or the terms are not always understood by other people, but the way they may pray, what they necessarily believe in, the fact that there's friction between them. Now, how are you going to make a government understand these nuances and the fact that there is friction and people do flee sometimes from each other? The solution that I'm humbly proposing is known as minority case law. How would this work? To put it very simply, it means that a community, right, a mosque, a synagogue, a temple, whenever an asylum seeker comes to the country, that community should have its own processes and produce its own evidence as to what the asylum seeker is going through. So me as a Muslim, right, I'm giving you an example. If I meet an asylum seeker, and by the way, our mosques and synagogues and temples may not always be open to asylum seekers. We don't always house refugees and asylum seekers, not always. This is my humble experience. Some may do, but maybe many others don't. But if an asylum seeker were to come and say, look, and I'm giving the example of the recent Afghani crisis because of the Taliban and the fact that they took over the country. It's something I was involved in, and we tried to help the Afghani asylum seeker and refugees. If an Afghani comes to the mosque, right, and says, look, I'm fleeing the Taliban, right? What should the mosque do, right? We could have our own lawyer, our own processes where we record the experiences of that Afghani individual. We record it, we give the evidence, we give all of these information and record it. Once we record it, and we do that objectively, when the asylum seeker goes to the court, right, we can then say, wait, we have our own minority case law or minority recorded case law to inform the judge about exactly what does it mean to be part of the Taliban? What does it mean to be an Afghani in that context? What does it mean to face the sectarian interpretation of the Taliban, which is diametrically opposed to the merciful and balanced interpretation of other Muslim sects, whether it is Shia or Sunni, because there is a much more literal interpretation that the Taliban engages in when it looks at the Quran. Now, this nuance is not always appreciated by the judge. If we then produce our own kind of court in the mosque or the synagogue or the temple, we produce our own case law, and I mean we file it, we document it, then we then have a voice. The asylum seeker has a voice, and we are able to challenge the decision of the judge in the court, strengthening the minority voice of the asylum seeker with information, with evidence, with scriptural information, with other information, with actually how they live in that country, right? We are then able to influence the outcome of that case, and we're able to control, if you like, much more the destiny of our own community members. Hopefully you see that. Hopefully I have explained it. I mean, this is a more technical academic concept, but I've tried to simplify it for you, okay? And therefore, what would the outcome be? Well, you can see from the slide here, asylum seeker goes to the community or scholar expert and makes his claim. Community experts take the witness statement and interview record. We clarify the terminologies, religious laws, the community customs according to primary data. We have a qualified lawyer, a legal representative, because people will say, oh, this community is biased. No, we have somebody who is objective, somebody who is, let's say, outside of the community that presides over such proceedings, right? And then what happens? Community experts submit this information to solicitors, right? They benefit from it. So the solicitors learn, the lawyers learn, the judges learn, right? And then what happens is we then have a database. We have an online database to assist similar cases. And you can see I've given examples here. What is an Iraqi identity document? What meaning does it have? What is the nature of an honor killing? And why is it committed by a few Muslims and or tribes? What cultural causes leads to discrimination between interfaith marriages? This is happening in India, in Pakistan, in other countries. The fact if a Muslim or Christian get together, or Hindu and Muslim, there are these sorts of, unfortunately, there's a lot of propaganda if two different faiths come together, right? And therefore, if we're able to do this, then we're able to strengthen the minority voice in our countries, right? And so to end, I want to end just by posing this or recounting to this conclusion. We have discussed the nature of the asylum seeker and refugee. We have discussed different statistics. We have discussed the procedure in a country. And I've given a humble solution of mine to case law. And therefore I pose you this question. This is me speaking as a Muslim, but this may apply, as I said, I don't want to presume anything or comment on other religions. Maybe our mosques or temples and synagogues and whatever religious community we are from, maybe these places of worship have become very ritual. Maybe we only focus on the needs of our own members. Maybe we have departed from that basic universal message, whether in scripture or in other systems, of helping people. And if we have lost sight of that, then we have narrowed the rights, narrowed the recognition of asylum seekers, and narrowed the scope of mercy and justice and solutions we can offer our fellow people. And I think for me, this is where I sometimes feel disconnected from sometimes the mosques I visit, because I sometimes feel that they are not doing enough, or they're only focused on their own sorts of parochial needs. Whereas what I've presented to you is you can see what is happening in the world. I'm going to stop there. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all that information, Dr. Panjwani. We have a few questions in the chat, and then I know we have Mr. Mohammed Jaffer who wants to ask in person, but I'll go to the chat first. There's a question from Mr. Raza Kara from Toronto. What assistance is given by the UN financially or monetarily to countries who host refugees? For example, Turkey. Germany probably doesn't need help, but Turkey, Uganda, Sudan, those third world countries, for sure they do. Is there any help available from the UN or government agencies?
Yes, he's asked three sort of connected questions, so I'll deal with all of them.
Sure.
Shall I just read them out and maybe connect them together? So that was one. And then it is believed, at least in Canada, refugees earn more than the lowest earner worker. How do you view this disparity? ISIJ of Toronto and philanthropists in the community are in the front line of helping refugees from any part of the world. Okay, Jazakallah for your question. So one is, I don't know the data in terms of the monetary assistance UN gives, but what I can say with certainty is that this monetary assistance depends very much on the political relationship between both countries, right? So I have to look at the statistics and figures if they're available, but you can take Iran. Iran, as we are all aware, is not given monetary assistance by the UN. It has to deal with its own problems. So that's just a specific example of a political relationship. In fact, I'll give you one other example with the Afghani evacuation crisis. In the UK, we were able to meet the Afghanis in Watford, and also where I live, a number of Afghanis came to Chelmsford and in Essex, right? Now, these Afghanis that came worked for the British government in Afghanistan. So the UN did give assistance to the UK to be able to host the refugees, right? But that's because of two very important things. That's because of the relationship between the UK and the UN. And secondly, because there was a specific relationship between the British government and the Afghani refugees that did come. Now, other Afghanis that didn't have this relationship were stopped at the airport. They were not allowed to board the plane. We tried to compile a database to be given to the UK government, which we did, to say, please let these families, they are Hazara or they are suffering persecution, but they were not allowed to board the plane. So I don't have the data available because that's a very specific question, but I'm giving you the broad outline. Canada, it is believed that at least in Canada, refugees earn more than the lowest earner worker. Well, you've said believed, so I would need some evidence there. I can tell you in the UK that asylum seekers are not allowed to work. We're dealing with asylum seekers. Refugees are allowed to work, but they would earn obviously a minimum wage or a very, very low wage. But an asylum seeker is not allowed to work. And if I'm correct, that is the case in most of the countries. Refugees, I agree with you, they would earn, but again, I'm not an expert on the Canadian economy and refugees, so I would need some evidence there. But the Canadian government would have to support the refugees naturally. ISIJ of Toronto and philanthropists are in the front line of helping refugees from any part of the world. I think, mashallah, that's a wonderful example. And I wish that there would be more examples like that within the Muslim community. And you see, this is the point I'm making. I'm not talking about specific mosques. I'm talking about coming up with a system. You see, I talked about minority case law as actual system in which we are using our religion to actually help people, which I don't believe we are doing. We have not come up with a system. We're relying on the state and the government, which gets it right and gets it wrong. But we are also able to organize ourselves. We're also able to come up with a system to help asylum seekers and refugees, rather than relying on one mosque, etc. So I'm talking about a more holistic way of looking at the problem. Shall I read out? Should we take Muhammad by Jafar because he had his hand up?
Yes, please. Mr. Muhammad Jafar, if you can unmute yourself and...
Yes, I have. Assalamu alaikum to Imran, my good friend. I got a question and a statement to help you.
Yes.
My question is, why is, and for my work in UNHCR in the field of work in Sahel region, why there's more affinity for asylum seekers who are female to get the things go forward further and faster than in a refugee seeking guy? If he's a male guy, he gets more affinity to be successful. Why is the case with most of the lawyers?
So sorry, you're saying why a woman would get more affinity or a man? Sorry.
If a woman is applying for asylum as an asylum seeker, she's more successful than a man. When a man asks for refugee status instead of female, the men are more successful in that area. That's my question. Number two, just wrap it up. Sorry. The question is this. Sorry, can you see me?
Yeah,
Hello?
I can't see, but I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I have to put the question to you now as a statement.
Yes.
Regarding the assignment of Muslim community to have a legal forum so they can individual communities should have a forum where they can have the refugees on a legal basis, assignment of a legal team in a community. Ahmadiyas in London, when they were persecuted in Pakistan, they did this. And as a matter of fact, if you approach the Muslim Council of Britain, they have a little bit of this system which you proposed. And I would be grateful if you can just more enlighten them with a more better project. Okay, but I would like to know about the first question. What's your answer to that, please?
Okay, Jazakallah. I'm just giving you my small experience. I mean, so far I have dealt with maybe 100 or so cases, right? 100 or so cases. You said that the women are more successful for the men. That was the first part, I believe, of your.
The women, when they're asking for, as an asylum seeker.
When they're asking for okay. From what I have gathered so far, I believe it's because that they may use the notions of sex trafficking and such reasons, which is why they are more successful, because we know trafficking is most high in women and children. And their asylum claim becomes more successful because they're recognized as a trafficker. So I've often found the modern slavery, because they say you are a victim of modern slavery, right? Once they actually pass that test and they're recognized, that bolsters their asylum claim, and therefore they're more successful. Whereas men are trafficked less, but in the case of drugs, right, drug trafficking, they can be victims of modern slavery. So I think that women and children, or women, are successful because of that. But also I would say, when it becomes a member of a particular social group, like you're talking about honor killings, right? Honor killings, generally speaking, women are the victims. There are male victims, but generally women are predominantly the victims. So they are going to be successful because they are the victims of those crimes.
You specified two specific areas on a female asylum seeker, but this was a general question. And the figure statistics in UNHCR, they show clearly more female affinity of lawyers for asylum seeking, and more, in the male area, the refugee. But anyway, thank you for your. So, how about the other suggestions that I made to you about the
Muslim Council of Britain? You said yes.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Okay. Yes. As I said, that I don't know specifically about the process of Muslim Council of Britain, exactly what they do, but this is my research so far. I'm coming from a legal perspective, that legally, to my knowledge, we do not have this system of minority case law. We don't have it. It doesn't exist in the UK. And I have presented this at various conferences by grace of Allah in Europe and other places. And I've suggested this to policymakers and researchers. So, and I'm giving you their reaction, right? Some find it interesting, but some are very threatened by it. I don't like to use Muslim, non-Muslim, but put it this way. Let's say people who are lawyers generally are threatened by it because they think that like Sharia law or some minority case law is going to take over the UK. This is not my suggestion. I'm saying this as a solution for all religions and cultures, that in our communities, we create our own cases. We're not challenging the courts. We are assisting the courts. You see that? So my knowledge so far is that Muslim Council of Britain or other institutions don't have this system. I'm trying to propose it. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. Good luck.
Okay, can I just add something related to that?
Yes.
I thought all these Western governments, especially, they have their own experts on the countries as to what's happening in the countries, the culture of the country, the divisions between various factions and all that. Is that not true?
Yes, a very good question, Nazmul Bhai. So 2 points here. I gave the example of country guidance. If you put on Google country guidance reports, and whether it's UK, Canada, Australia, you'll find a list come up. Now, these country guidance reports are produced by people working in the government. They are not necessarily experts in the country. Some of them will be, some of them not, but they collect data from secondary sources, right? So there is some level of expertise, but not a level of expertise to this nuanced level where I gave examples of, like, fiqh mas'ala or jurisprudential mas'ala between Shia and Sunni, or the cultural ostracization that a woman may face, when they get divorced, or if they have, for example, a relationship before marriage. Now, these sorts of things are more appreciated perhaps by us in the community. We can see how parents would feel if this were to happen, right? I'm talking about giving that authentic cultural religious voice to the asylum seekers, which they don't have. So to put it very simply, we should speak on their behalf. They're our people. Why allow other people speak on their behalf who don't know about their norms, you see?
Sure.
But I take your point. There is data, but it's not always expert data.
Sure. It's 3:05. You're okay to stay on for another 10-15 minutes?
Yes.
Yeah,
sure.
wonderful. Do you want to go back to the chat?
Yes. So
Reza Hirji.
Reza Hirji says, can you speak to foreign influence and involvement in the creation of refugees in the first place, e.g. Iraq, Yemen? Yes, Reza Bai's point is valid, and something I mentioned in the presentation, that there is cause and effect. We have the cause of Western countries being involved in wars or arms trade and bombing countries, right? We know the case of US and, let's say, Afghanistan and Iraq, using oil as a pretext. We know a lot of these things are there. So yes, this foreign influence and involvement causes displacement and refugees, which is why I am humbly proposing that we shouldn't just rely on governments, but as communities, we should try to take the matter in our own hands and try to be more organized to help refugees. And that's why I feel the purpose of mosques, I think the system in mosques can be better generally. Shaukat by Hussein, any preventative measures in place to stop the creation of refugees and asylum seekers in the first place? Yes, I would say a couple of things. Stop wars, but that's an idealistic scenario. And two is, I would say, to create better systems in place to support any type of displacement, which I still think we need. So I think I've answered that generally, but that's a more idealistic question, difficult to answer. Munawar by Khalfan, who I've met recently, just has given a thank you. I don't want to read it out because don't want to do that, but thank you, Munawar Bhai, for your thank you comment and encouragement. Shaukat by Hussein, the proposal is excellent. Well, I'm not saying that for any praise of myself, but I think it's good to have support for any proposal. Shafiq by Kara, there was no asylum refugee problems on such a large scale before the Syrian war. Was it all planned by Western powers? These are large scale questions. I think there is, yes, some truth to world planning and governments planning ahead and thinking about where they want to bomb and these things. Yes, you can take Afghani crisis. Taliban then is a kind of creation of Western powers as well, and then left to their own devices, and then you have a large-scale problem. So yes, I agree that these things are caused and planned by some Western powers, but it doesn't mean that we are not to blame. Muslims themselves continue fighting each other. We have to take responsibility for that. Why are we fighting each other? Why are we saying that, in Iraq, certain tribes and gangs fight with each other, or in Malaysia, you have a literalistic interpretation, maybe with the government, and then with Shias not necessarily being respected there. So again, we also have to look inside ourselves. I think I've answered the question, but thank you for the also encouraging comments from Muhammad Bhai Jafar and Shaukat Bhai Hussein and Munawar Bhai, and Nerjis Bhai as well.
Okay, one other question from me, if I may. I don't see anyone else out there. What's the role of charities helping the asylum seeker and refugees? I know in Canada, the charities do a lot to bring in refugees, to support them. asylum seekers, I know of cases where the asylum seekers go into church, seek refuge, and they are there for a long time until the situation is resolved and all that. Especially when there is a threat of deportation from the country. Role of charities in UK.
Yes, Jazakallah. Yeah, so you're right. The charities do a lot. Obviously, British Red Cross and Oxfam and these other places, they actually conduct reports as well in these places of persecution. And when they do come to the UK, I mean, clothes and refuge and things like that are given to them. So yes, these charities do a lot. And I think that we, as Muslims, I think we also have our own charitable organizations. I think as Raza Baikara also said, I think he's right that yes, we have specific communities organizations that do help. I think that charities are always there and may Allah bless their work. But I think that until we create a system that can recognize legally their rights and create systems of work for these people and shelter, then it's like we're always relying on charities. Okay, yeah, they'll give some money and clothes. But, I always ask myself this question: if I was in asylum seeker's position, would I want always a handout, or would I want a journey in my life or a progression in my life where I can get security and work and support my family? And I think we want to move towards that line of thinking where we're giving them more economic stability.
Excellent. I mean, we have cases here, or charities here, who do support all the refugees coming in, initial settlement help, the food, the clothing, all that, and try to find them jobs so that, as you say, they become independent and take care of themselves. Yeah. Okay, if there are no more questions, okay, one last question, all right, from Raza Bhai. How would such a project be funded? Which project are you talking about, Raza Bhai? Are you talking about what Dr. Panjwani suggested?
Yes, I think so. If you can hear me.
Yes, Jazakallah.
Yeah, apart from that, apart from this funding, you also have restrictions, right? Do you have any data to show how many asylum seekers from our community have been claiming this refugee status or asylum? That's number one thing. And where would you draw the line? Most of the people who are coming in, there could be Muslims, could be Christians, could be anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to accommodate all these people? And do we have the resources? That's the main thing. Where are the resources? Where are they get the resources from?
Yes. Jazakallah, Raza Bhai. So as I said, that minority case law is a proposal for all religious and cultural communities. So, for example, a Hindu community would take in a Hindu asylum seeker, right? An Afghani community can take Afghani asylum seekers. So that's why I'm proposing this, so that it strengthens the religious identity and the social identity of those communities. So no, it wouldn't be one community or a Shia Muslim community taking in everybody. That's impractical. It would be each community looking after their own, number one. Number two is in terms of data, well, there is data compiled by UN and other places as to how many, for example, Afghani refugees. But yes, we can also do our own kind of census or own data for our own asylum seekers. But even just with the data we have, it is still sufficient to be able to start something. Number three, in terms of funding, I would say that would be from our own communities. And I always pose this question is that if we can put money into food and feeding each other, and food seems to be very important for all of us, food and paying speakers to recite majalis and coming and doing 10 days of lectures and this and funding mosques, well, I think we do have money to actually fund something arguably more important than all of these things, which is to help other people. Of course, we can gain assistance from the government, because that's why, you see, this proposal is not, I'm not making this proposal something totally sectarian or only Islamic. Yes, it is inspired from the Quran in the Islamic context, but this is a proposal that benefits all, right? And that's why I say that if our vision of Muslims and Islam is something beyond what we have, beyond just the programs in the center, and we are hearkening back to the contributions of even Muslim scientists who made advances in astronomy and medicine and contributed to wider society, this is a generous proposal to all. And we are able to come together and work with other communities to say, look, this is what we can do, what can you do? And so this is my line of thinking.
Thank you. Shafiq Kara, you're next, but I'll tell you, unmute yourself and also keep it brief, please. Thank you. You know how to unmute yourself? I'll see if I can do it.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Way
Briefly.
back in 1990s, when lots of people were coming from Iran, we had this secretary in our company, and she happened to be a part-time pastor. She had already converted her husband to Christianity, and they went around. They would find the new immigrants coming in, refugees, try to put them in our factory and get them the jobs. But they would also make sure that they attended the church services every weekend. They would go and pick them up, take them to the church services, and take care of them from 6 months to 1 year. And here is a case that this lady was a Shia, and I was fasting, and she was fasting, and she says, look, they are helping me, they are almost pressuring me to become a Christian. I'm not sure whether she did, but she was under great pressure. So this was one way of them taking care of the people or immigrants coming in, find them a place to live, give them the pots and pans and the kitchen stuff, take care of them for a few months, and they would become Christians. There was a similar case where I live in Markham. This lady said, when I came, I had nothing. I had nowhere to go. They found me a place to live. I've been there for 2 years taking care of me. Why shouldn't I be a Christian?
Thank you,
Then
Shafiq.
I was a member of the Syrian Refugee Committee.
Okay, Shafiq. Shafiq, yeah. You made your points. So, Imran Bhai, do you want to comment on Shafiq Bhai's examples, please?
Sure. I'm assuming that the statement or the question is about how we are maybe not doing enough and other people are, and then becoming that religion. Yes. Yes. Shafiq, by that I agree with you. I agree wholeheartedly that you are absolutely right. They would see the value of that religion because that religion is in practice. They are actually helping. They see the benefit of that religion. And this was my point. If you look at Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon his life, people also converted to Islam because they saw the Prophet was helping poor people. Said, why should I not be a Muslim if such a religion is being merciful and practical to my life? And this is my humble point, that maybe we have lost the practicality of the religion for people's lives. And hence other people will go elsewhere, which is up to them. But surely we should offer something from ourselves. So I agree with you. Yes.
Nazmul, if you don't mind, I was a member of the Syrian Refugee Committee.
Very briefly.
Yeah, Syrian Refugee Committee. We attended these meetings with the other faiths, and we were asked at that time, would you be able to take any? And surprisingly, most of the Christian churches, they took some, most of them. We had one small Islamic group. They said, we will take care of 40. So I turned over to our representative here, he was a member of the committee. He says, we'll have to get back to you. They called me after 2 weeks and he says, no, we can't take. I said, we have the whole center. We got the whole basement empty there. He says, no, we'll just ask for donations from people and that's about it. We collected $5,300, bought them school bags, and that's it. But we refused to accommodate them in the center.
Shafiq, this is not the forum to criticize other.
No, what I'm saying is,
okay, that's fine.
we
Thank you.
have to be practical and go out and welcome these refugees.
Yeah, thank you. But I know you're also helped personally and in groups, Afghani people who came. You know, there are other groups helping Hazara families now, right?
Yes.
You are part of that too. So, the community, even if it's not through the main Jamaat, they are doing whatever they can. So, kudos to them. And, we wish, everybody could chip in and do more. Imran Bhai, sorry, Shafiq, I had to cut you off.
No problem.
In view of the time pressures. Raza Hij's comment, do you want to address that? And then we'll bring this to an end.
Yeah, just he's put at the end, well, there's a need to change the paradigm of what true Islam is for people to fund such a project. Thanks for excellent presentation. Organization for Islamic Learning, OIL, sponsored 3 families. Yes, this is what I'm humbly proposing. I'm trying to broaden the vision of our interpretation of Islam, capture its beautiful spirit, and in a way that we are respecting each other. As Nazmul Bhai said, we commend the work of everybody that is doing this wonderful work. And my humble proposal is not to go against any of that, is to create a system, to assist in a more consistent way, that we're not just relying on individuals, because one day you have a good individual with a good heart, tomorrow sometimes the individual may not do. So let's create a system that we can, inshallah, help people. Thank you.
Wonderful. So with that, at 3:22, we'll bring the meeting to a close. But before that, I really must thank Dr. Panjwani for his excellent presentation and giving us his proposal, etc. I'm not sure if Canada is ahead in this game compared to the UK, but we Canadians certainly talk a big talk, but in action, it takes time to get through all those proposals. But that's politics and bureaucracy, I guess. Next week, please join us to listen to an eye surgeon. He will tell us about what he does and the diseases of the eye and the surgeries that are possible and all that interesting stuff. So we'll see you then. You'll get the notice in due course, hopefully tonight or tomorrow. And all the international participants, thank you for joining. And we'll see you same time, same place next week. Thank you. And thanks again, Dr. Panjwani. Thank you.
Thank you.